All right, ladies and gentlemen, long time no talk. I wanted to do a bit of a post-mortem analysis on PulseChain and discuss kind of what some of the major failures were, why PulseChain up until today has been a complete failure, and my thoughts as to what the future may or may not hold. So, folks, just a bit of context before we get started here. I just want to make clear that, I'm someone who's been very openly critical of Richard Heart for the last few years. I have been one of the most consistent people calling out Richard Heart for abandoning PulseChain, for effectively abandoning PulseChain. And I've been warning people for years that the consequence of Richard's effective abandonment, him hiding under a rock, him refusing to get out there and promote PulseChain, would be the inevitable failure of PulseChain, because he was the number one source of marketing and onboarding and organic growth. And with him gone, this of course wasn't going to work out, and we've seen that. We've seen that the bridge activity is all but dead. Most days are negative outflows. If you look at, there's some Telegram rooms where you can look at the hourly and daily inflows and net flows, and there's whole hour stretches or day periods where there's next to no money moving in or out. It's extremely depressing. The amount of daily active users, hex stakers, interactions in PulseChain, whatever metric you want to use, PulseChain has up until today been a complete failure, and I've been warning that this was going to happen. And people were more interested in sticking their heads in the sand, and for some reason, so much of this PulseChain community gaslit themselves into make-believing that if they just ignored the problems and made believe like they didn't exist, that the market would just, look past these things and we would somehow succeed. In my opinion, that was always an incredibly silly thing to do, because the market sees problems whether you choose to stick your head in the sand or not. It's always struck me as extremely silly, this constant avoiding the actual problems that exist, this constant justification, this endless infinite justification for Richard Heart's failures have been in my opinion have led to the failures we've seen, because the community has failed to hold Richard Heart accountable. And so I want to go over some of those failures and kind of discuss at least my view on how things could be looking at, in the future here. So again, folks, I want to make another thing clear here is I'm someone who wants to see PulseChain succeed. Back in 2021, when I got my channel started in crypto, a millionaire of the moon, I did it with my friend and business partner. We started covering crypto. We got to 36,000 subscribers, and for a few months, we were the biggest channel covering Hex and Richard Heart last cycle. And so, I personally invested a great deal into the sacrifices, a great deal of time, energy, money, and my reputation as well. I wanted PulseChain to succeed. This isn't, we're in 2025, December 2025, going to 2026. This isn't 2021 anymore, where the critics of Richard Heart are, out-of-touch boomers who don't know what self-custody is. Nowadays, the people criticizing Richard Heart are his closest supporters. All the vast majority of the biggest KOLs, the builders in this space, validators, people who run validate. Everyone has been extremely disappointed to varying degrees and for various reasons, but all for good reason. And I think it's important to go over some of these things again to understand what the future might hold. So why don't we kind of start delving into it a bit more, right? So look, guys, PulseChain is down pretty much around 95, 94%. We keep putting in new all-time lows. And, while we've been going down recently, the writing has been on the wall for quite a while. I mean, it all started really, during the sacrifice phases. Before the sacrifice phases, Richard Heart would paint himself as this public thought leader, this public intellectual, somebody who doesn't hide from a fight, who doesn't back down, who's out there cheerleading for his mission, because we were different, we were true DeFi, we had real principles, yada yada yada. So he would call Satoshi a bitch for hiding like a coward when he didn't. So he would do all this. He framed himself as the public thought leader of Hex. He was the number one marketer, number one source of organic growth. And so he did all this leading up to the sacrifice phases. And, the second he got all our money, he ran away. He hid under a rock. He stepped back from the public limelight. And look, there's lots of excuses for that behavior. People say, oh, the SEC was after him, oh, Interpol was after him. Whether it's a legitimate reason or not, it really doesn't matter. The effect on us is the exact same. What the effect is effective abandonment. There's no one promoting this thing. There's 1,000 other layer ones. Without Richard out there promoting PulseChain, we were going to fail, and we have failed pretty much. So, him doing this giant 180, this massive hypocrisy, going back, turning his back on all the principles he preached for years as holy and unimpeachable. The way he's able to turn his back on everything at the drop of a dime. That's when we start seeing that. That was definitely a red flag for sure. And all this stuff, folks, I just want to make clear as I go on that this speaks to the fundamentals. People can stomach price action, volatile price action, price going down for a long time. Just because price changes doesn't necessarily mean that you should reconsider your investment thesis. But when the fundamentals change, you should reconsider your investment thesis. And Richard Hart is an integral piece of the fundamentals. None of this bullshit works without him. And so, what else happened, folks? He bought the ETH top. His average price was $3,800. He had all the opportunity in the world for years. I'm not sure if months, if not years, to buy, around $2,000 ETH, even below. Why he didn't, who knows? So he bought the ETH top. He also called the Bitcoin bottom wrong. He was one of the most public guys out there last cycle saying 10K and pray. Bitcoin cycle bottom was like 16K, something like that. So he's been getting these big decisions wrong. He launched pump tires. A year after that pump fund narrative had already kind of had its boom and bust cycle. So he's always kind of late to the game. He's getting these giant things wrong. These things that he can't afford to get wrong. He constantly is. Then we had the whole kind of EHEX debacle where, the market has chosen. This was another huge thing that I think really, hammered in one of the nails, into the coffin. That is PulseChain. Where, guys, look, Richard's not dumb. He knew fully well that when he launched PulseChain, and when there was two versions of Hex, that the whole system might be heavier now, and he might have to do things to curtail this new problem. Before the sacrifices, when he was trying to get all of our money, he would say things like, oh, I don't want to see any cheap Hex anywhere. And then after he got all our money, then we see, oh, the market has chosen, right? Funny how that works. We're meant to make believe like, oh, he just had no idea. He never considered this before. If he actually was thoughtful and wanted to look after his people, what he should have done is launched, the market has chosen tweet when Hex first launched. By doing it the way he did it, he allowed months and months and months of time to go by for people to keep accumulating EHEX, thinking that the founders still thought, I didn't want to see any cheap Hex anywhere. We're going to see parity. We're going to see, or at least the ratio tighten, whatever, right? He allowed plenty of time to accumulate EHEX, full well knowing that the system was too heavy, and he should have foreseen this as a problem. If he was thoughtful, he should have did something like that when PHEX first launched, when the chain first launched, and when things were forked over. That would have minimized the damage, but he didn't, right? He, for whatever reason, he didn't do that. He caused massive FUD to his community, splitting the community. It was a huge issue, which served to further kind of divide the community and really, backstab his people. And now we have the most recent kind of knife to the back of the community is this whole PerveX grift. This new thing where he wants to do some OTC market kind of thing. When he did this, the way he did this, and not accepting Richard Hart coins like he first did with PulseChain and PulseX. And I know I might be preaching in the choir here, but what this does is it incentivizes a bunch of sell pressure, sell his old tickers to get into DAI or ETH or whatever to participate in this new thing, while also drying up a bunch of potential buy pressure. So this was an extremely devious thing to do. I mean, this completely undermines years of hard work from the community. I mean, this guy drained, $15.4 million of potential buy pressure from his chain, and $15.4 million of buy pressure was injected into PulseChain today, you best believe that we would be at sack rates right now. But instead of doing that, he's moved on to his new grift here with PerveX, which, by the way, I haven't heard many people mention this, but I could totally see this inviting a bunch of regulatory scrutiny in a way that, PulseChain and PulseX, never quite could. I mean, PulseChain was just a fork of Ethereum. PulseX just a fork of Uniswap. These were kind of tried and true tested ideas, but PerveX here, this is essentially, again, we don't know all the details here, but this is kind of like an anonymous OTC market, highly unregulated, no KYC, no AML. I can imagine this drawing far more regulatory scrutiny than PulseChain and PulseX ever could. So look, it's a more dovish environment regulatory-wise, both in the United States and kind of globally. So, that's good. I don't want this to get the ire of regulatory scrutiny, but something like this, in my opinion, is far more liable to regulatory scrutiny than any of his previous stuff. I don't really see people covering that. And another thing to understand, folks, about PerveX as well is, the valuation here, $15.4 million as of the the 4th of December here, but the real market cap is probably closer to 30 million plus, because you understand there's a multiplier bonus here, right? So I mean, this pool alone raised $5.2 million. That means the effective market cap that pool is contributing post multiplier, if we assume like a 2.6x multiplier, is actually closer to about $13 million of market cap contribution from this one pool alone. So folks, like, the real market cap of PerveX here is 30 mil plus. So that's getting pretty close to ink territory. So it's not even that significantly cheaper. So, there's been a lot of negative behavior, a lot of destructive behavior from the founder towards us. Now, I kind of want to go over why this is all important to understand, because even though there has been a lot of failures, some of which I've mentioned here, I think the greatest failure of Richard Heart, which has led to all this kind of death and destruction, is his effective abandonment of PulseChain. None of this works without Richard at the helm by design. He painted himself as the figurehead, and now he's trying to kind of bow out and make believe like he's completely integral to this whole thing. So, folks, look, I want to go over the critical failures of Richard Heart the last few years here, because now that he's launching his new grift here with PerveX, there's some hope that things might turn around, because maybe Rich is going to use this as an excuse to start getting back out there again. Maybe get an easy win on the board by just pumping the shit out of some low cap shitter, So I hope he does do that. That's all well and good, because I don't want to see this community's years of community effort and money go to complete waste. I'm still, unfortunately, a hostage on this chain. So I don't want to see what happened to PulseChain happen again. But I fear that if Richard has already shown that he's willing to abandon his closest supporters at the drop of a dime, that he might be willing to do it again in the future. If he uses PerveX as an excuse to get back out there again, okay, great. But what happens when a day comes where, he doesn't feel baller? That's one of the reasons Richard cited as to why he's hiding and doesn't make content anymore, because he doesn't feel baller. So, it's Mr. Perv today, could be Mrs. Perv tomorrow. I mean, what if he does another sack? What if one day, if he did it to PulseChain, guys, if he abandoned PulseChain, he could abandon PerveX again. So, look, guys, if this has any chance of working in the future, if PulseChain has any chance of one day being revived and like some zombie rising from the grave, the community needs to hold Richard accountable. None of this works without him. He needs to be out there cheerleading, doing whatever he can. Folks, look, if you're going to bet on an individual to really change the world in a big way, that individual needs to find any excuse possible to get out there and do whatever they can and try their best to make changes in the world and to fight for their thing, okay? on individual who finds every excuse he can to do nothing, to hide, to tuck tail and run, to not promote his stuff. This is not someone that you can rely upon. This is not a trustworthy, reliable individual that you can bet on in the future. So I hope this does change. I hope that PerveX is Richard's excuse to get out there. And if he does start getting out there, guys, you got to hold him accountable, because if he fucking pulls the same shit, we're all fucked. This is going to zero. PerveX is going to zero. Everything's going to fucking zero. So, god damn it, people, have a little respect for yourselves. If we're all going to get out there and put our reputations on the line, put our money on the line, put our time and effort and life energy on the line, fucking demand the bare minimum from Richard and call him out for fucking hiding under a rock. You know, make sure, you know, if you're going off to fucking war, that your general, your leader needs to be fucking right there with you, or else the whole thing goes to shit. So that's what happened with PulseChain, guys. That's why we were a failure, because our leader has effectively abandoned us, left us completely directionless. And so maybe things are changing now with PerveX. Sorry. I really hope that's the case. But I fear that if the community doesn't start to get over whatever it is that causes them to stick their head, you know, in the sand, if we don't start as a community demanding more of Richard, then PulseChain is truly dead, and PerveX is truly going nowhere. So I hope, again, just to maybe wrap up here, that we learn the lessons of the past here. We learn that we realize the consequences of Richard's abandonment, the lack of promotion, the lack of direction, the lack of unity. You know, a brand new baby layer one was never going to succeed without clear, strong, and present leadership at the top. And now neither will PerveX. PerveX, I hope, is Richard's attempt to get back out there and find some success, which will hopefully one day carry over to PulseChain. And hopefully, you know, PulseChain won't forever be a dead chain. But for now it is, and it is because of Richard's effective abandonment of PulseChain. If the community is going to take another chance on Richard and really support him and really get out there in a big way and really try this new thing again, like we did when PulseChain first launched, when Hex launched, we need Richard out there with us, working hard beside us for this thing to ever have a chance of working out. So I just wanted to put that out there, you know, get that off my chest. Because if we don't see that, guys, if Richard doesn't put up this time, if he doesn't get out there and promote this thing like he should have done for PulseChain, we're just going to see the same thing, and that would just be a tragedy. So I implore all of you, if you don't want to see this thing be a failure, and if you don't want PulseChain to be dead forever, start calling out Richard Hart, you know, through whatever means. Richard needs to get back out there, because if he doesn't, this is dead for good.